When you think of the rising stars in college football coaching, Dave Aranda and Lincoln Riley are right at the top of the list. Prior to getting hired by USC, Riley spent 7 years at Oklahoma, first as the offensive coordinator and then as the head coach, and in that time he produced 4 top 5 offenses, with another 2 finishing in the top 15. There aren't a lot of guys who can match those rankings, but for his part, Aranda's been nearly as impressive, including a run of 6 straight top 15 defenses at 3 different schools from 2012 to 2017. This season, Week 11 pitted these two coaches against each other, and in that game, Aranda and his defensive coordinator Ron Roberts got the best of Riley, holding his offense to just 260 yards and 14 points. Did Baylor provide the blueprint for shutting down Riley's offense? Check out the rest of the video and let me know what you think in the comments below. Superficially, Baylor's defense in this game didn't stand out too much in today's college football world, running one of those hybrid-based nickel looks that's taken over the country over the last decade. On the depth chart, they list 3 true defensive linemen and then an edge player that they called a jack, who's a hybrid stand-up end/rushbacker type of player. In the Oklahoma game, that guy played exclusively at the first level, putting the Bears in a de facto 4-2-5 look for most of the game. They then play with a nickelback that they, like lots of teams nowadays, call the star. In this game, that guy lined up to what's called the passing strength, and that'll be either the side with more receiving threats or the side with the more dangerous receiving threats. On this play, Oklahoma has 2 detached receivers to the top of the screen, and so the star's going to line up to that side. From that position, that guy's primarily a down safety, so you're going to see him playing a lot in underneath coverage, as well as getting involved in the blitz and the run game. Once you know who's going to be on the field, the next critical game plan decision is the coverage world that you're going to live in, and in this game, Baylor played mostly split safety coverages, so we're talking about a lot of variants at cover 2 and cover 4, where there's a deep safety to each side of the field. When we combine this with what we just said about Baylor's front personnel, we can understand a lot of the strategy for both teams in this game. When Baylor plays that de facto 4-2 front with a safety over the top to each side, the two halves of the formation become near mirror images of each other, with each side of the field having 3 defenders in the front, and then a cornerback and a safety outside and over the top. Then, when the star lines up to the passing strength, that gives Baylor's defense a 6-man side and a 5-man side. So if you're Oklahoma, which side would you rather attack? Obviously, if you can, you want to get to the side with fewer defenders, and so a lot of their strategy, especially in the run game, was based around creating advantages to that 5-man side of the defense, and a lot of Baylor's success came down to how they shut that strategy down. Let's start by looking at one of Oklahoma's main ideas in this matchup. On this play, they're setting 2 detached receivers to the right side of the formation. Baylor's designating this as the passing strength, and so this will be the side that the star lines up to, and this is what Oklahoma wants, because by lining up like this, they're able to control where the star goes. They want to force the defense to set that 6-man side to the right so that they can then come back and run the ball to the left. Once they've got the star set to the right side of the formation like this, the Sooners are then going to put a tight ends to the left side, and this gives them an extra run blocker to that 5-man side, the goal here being to overload that side even more by running a counter play. Now, I've talked about counter in a lot of my other Lincoln Riley videos, so if you want to hear more, I'll link to those in the description below, but for now, all that you need to know is that this play pulls 2 additional blockers to the play side edge. On this play, those 2 blockers are going to be the right guard and then this H-back, who they're motioning into the core of the formation before the snap. After the snap, those 2 guys are going to pull from right to left, hoping to get the ball off tackle into the left side edge. The question for Baylor, then, is how do you match those 2 extra blockers? And part of the answer comes from how they're using this edge defender right here. On this play, that guy happens to be the jack, but everything that I'm about to say could apply equally well to their defensive ends. There's often a tendency for us fans to assume that these edge defenders are just contained guys who are responsible for shutting down the edge, but there are other ways to use them, and in this game, Baylor was generally asking them to spill the ball to the outside. By that, I mean that instead of sitting outside to take away the edge like we might expect them to do, that defender is going to come down inside of the tight end. By taking away that inside gap, he's actually giving up the edge and encouraging the ball to get outside of him. So why would you want to do this? Why would you want to encourage the ball to get outside and around the edge? Well, when that jack attacks the tight end's inside gap, he's also going to draw help from the left tackle right here. The idea is that if that left tackle is helping the tight end with the jack, then he's going to have a hard time climbing up to block the linebackers behind him, and we can see right here that all 3 of Oklahoma's playside blockers are now occupied by Baylor's 2 first-level defenders. To take advantage of this, Baylor's then asking those 2 linebackers to scrape hard to the edge, where they can take on the 2 pullers. Just like the jack, those guys are going to spill those blocks, meaning that they're going to attack the gaps inside of the pullers, again, apparently giving up the edge and allowing the ball to get outside. So what's going on here? What's the game plan? This brings us back to those split safety coverages that I mentioned earlier. When those linebackers scrape hard to the edge and spill the blocks of those 2 pullers, the running back is going to be forced to bounce the ball outside. When he does this, that split safety over the top is going to be the final edge defender. He attacks hard downhill, plays the running back inside out, forces him to the sidelines, and makes first contact at the line of scrimmage. By asking their front defenders to spill the ball outside like this then, Baylor forces the running back to run east-west, and that allows their safety to get into the play as an extra run defender. This strategy was massively effective and really took Oklahoma off their game. In every game that I've charted, Riley's run counter 10 or more times, and it's produced some huge gains for them on the outside. In the Baylor game, though, they ran counter just 3 times, all in the first quarter. They gained just 7 yards on those 3 plays, and then they never called counter again, so this was a huge schematic win for the Bears. In a similar way, these split safety coverages also helped Baylor take away another one of Oklahoma's biggest threats, which was the scrambling ability of quarterback Caleb Williams. For example, on this play, the Sooners are running a bunch set into the short side of the field. That makes this the passing strength, and so this will be the side that the star goes to as that extra defender. When Baylor plays split safeties against this, though, they're able to have both a safety over the top of that strong side, while also playing with their other safety over the top to the weak side. Baylor's front four did a pretty good job of getting pressure in this game, and on this play, they're going to be able to collapse the pocket a little bit, forcing Williams to scramble out and to his left. When he does this, however, that weak safety over the top is able to fly downhill, where he makes the tackle before Williams has a chance to turn upfield. Once we start to watch for those safeties as the ultimate outside defenders, we see them start to pop up all over the place, both in the run game and in the passing game. On this play, Riley's trying to attack their aggressive responses to the run with a play-action rollout. Here, the Sooners want to roll Williams out to the right, to the wide side of the field where he's got more room to work with. To do this, they're putting 2 detached receiving threats into the short side of the field, and this will, among other things, force the star to line up to this side and keep him from being an extra defender to contain the rollout in the opposite direction. Now, the interesting thing about this formation just before the snap is that it looks a lot like the counter look that we just saw. Remember that on that play, the right guard and the H-back tight end were pulling from right to left into the short side of the field. Well, after the snap, Oklahoma's going to pull the right guard, just like on a counter or a power play, and the goal here is to get this safety to the short side of the field to trigger, flying down to the line of scrimmage as an edge defender. After the snap, we see that this is really effective, with that guy coming downhill to attack the line of scrimmage, but when he does this, it lets this slot receiver sneak past him, freeing him up to run a crossing route back in the direction of Williams' role. The thing to remember here, though, is that in Baylor's split safety coverages, there's still going to be another safety lurking back here to the weak side of the formation. And so when the quarterback throws that crossing route, that safety is able to come up and lay a nice hit on the receiver. In this case, the receiver dropped the ball before he got there, but it definitely didn't help that there was someone flying up to hit him like this. Now that we know a little bit more about how all of this works, we can understand how Oklahoma's game plan developed as the game went on, because they knew that if they wanted to get the ball outside for some explosive plays, they had to account for those safeties. On this play, the Sooners will end up running a reverse to the right, and now we understand all the different moving parts that went into their plan. For the formation, they're setting trips into the short side of the field up at the top of the screen. This move forces the star to line up to the side and takes him out of the picture for the reverse when it works back in the opposite direction. As we now know, when this reverse comes back to attack the opposite edge, this weak side safety here is going to be the guy flying down to contain it. So what's Oklahoma going to do to account for him? On this play, they're going to release their quarterback out to try and block that safety. This obviously isn't an ideal matchup, but we can understand now what they're doing and why they have to do it. If they can't get a blocker for that safety, then this play's not going to go anywhere. As the play develops, the quarterback doesn't get a great block on that guy, but it does look like the safety has to worry about him just enough that he misses the tackle, letting the ball get outside for a nice gain. Of course, you can't play the whole game with your quarterback as a lead blocker, and so to understand the next phase of development in this matchup, we have to go to an unlikely place. We have to look at how Baylor played their cornerbacks in coverage. We might tend to think of run defense and coverage as totally separate things, but a major point that we've started to see in this video and that I try to highlight on this channel is that they are really inseparable from each other. Okay, so let's talk coverage. In this game, Baylor's cornerbacks played what's typically called a mod technique, where mod stands for man on demand or man only deep, depending on who you're talking to. What this means is that their cornerbacks would typically line up across from their receiver, and then if that receiver goes vertical, then the cornerback's going to cover him. Combined with those split safety principles that we've been talking about in this game, this is going to make the Bears very strong against the downfield passing game. On this play, for example, we see this cornerback lined up with an outside shade on his receiver, and he's preparing to either mirror him or soft press him. As I've said, that guy's playing mod rules here, and so after the snap, when his receiver releases vertically down the hash, the cornerback's going to carry that guy. We can't see it here, but this is one of Baylor's split safety coverages, and so there's also a safety playing inside and over the top of this, giving the Bears a nice inside-outside bracket with that receiver stuck in between those two defensive backs. The key for the run game, though, is what happens when that receiver doesn't go vertical. Remember that MOD stands for man on demand or man only deep, and so if that receiver releases inside, the cornerback's not going to run with him. He's instead going to let him go, pass him off to the under coverage to the inside, and then zone off in the flat looking for another receiver to break out toward him. So far, we've just been talking about the impact of MOD in the passing game, but as I've started to suggest, it also gave Baylor a great response to some of Oklahoma's adjustments in the outside run game. Remember, in the run game, the Sooners needed to account for those safeties on the edge. Well, in this play, they're going to use this receiver to crack back on that safety, trying to seal him off to the inside and open up the edge for the running back. So, what do Baylor's cornerback coverage rules have to do with this? Well, remember, the cornerback is only carrying his receiver if he runs vertical. If that guy doesn't go vertical, then the cornerback is zoning off to the outside. That means that after the snap, when that receiver releases inside to crack back on the safety, the cornerback is going to sit on the edge, letting him replace the safety as that outside defender. When the running back tries to get to the edge, he sees that cornerback sitting there, and he's forced to cut back inside to the pursuit, giving the Bears a nice tackle for loss on 2nd and 2. So far, we've talked a lot about how Baylor's defensive structure let them take away explosive plays in the outside run game, the quarterback keeper and scramble game, and the downfield passing game with those brackets over the top. So what did that leave open for the Sooners? Well, they did do an okay job of attacking underneath all of those split safety brackets, and a patient, efficient, quick passing game was a potential weakness of Baylor's split safety coverage structure in this game. On this play, for example, they're lining up with 3 receiving threats to the top of the screen, and so the star is going to line up to that side. We haven't talked a lot about strong side coverage yet, but the idea here is that the star is going to line up outside of the slot receiver, and then he's going to have a safety lined up inside and over the top. So the Bears are going to create the bracket to this side with those 2 defenders over the slot threat. To attack this structure, that slot receiver is just going to run vertical, taking those 2 defensive backs right with him. With those defenders out of the picture, though, that's going to isolate this cornerback up here at the top of the screen, one-on-one with his outside receiver. This is especially true on this play, where the Bears are read blitzing their linebackers, which further empties out the middle of the coverage. That receiver's then going to be able to beat his man on a curl route here, and the quarterback hits him for a nice gain. Ultimately, though, Oklahoma struggled to string together a lot of long drives with plays like this. They needed some explosive plays, and in this regard, they probably left some yards on the table in the downfield passing game, and we can attribute this to a pretty safe pressure package from Baylor, which did serve to speed things up just enough to keep the Sooner quarterback from getting dialed in. Here, for example, down at the bottom of the screen, we see another one of those mod cornerbacks playing as receiver with an outside shade and a split safety inside and over the top. So we know that the goal here is to create a bracket between those 2 defenders. After the snap, though, that wide receiver is going to beat his cornerback by first faking an inside release and then breaking cleanly across his face to get back to the outside. This has the effect of neutralizing that safety. Remember, that guy's playing inside of that receiver, and so when the receiver is able to get free to the sidelines like this, it takes that inside safety out of the play. If we run this play forward a little bit more, we see that the wide receiver has actually gotten a step on his cornerback and that he's left a lot of space between himself and the sidelines for the quarterback to drop the ball into. So this is kind of a perfect look to throw a fade against. On this play, the ball's a little bit overthrown, though, and so it falls harmlessly incomplete. What contributed to this inaccuracy? Well, if we go back to the pre-snap look here and keep an eye on this linebacker, we'll see that he's blitzing while the jack to the opposite side is dropping out to replace him in coverage. This is a very safe pressure. It only brings 4 guys, but because that linebacker is an unexpected rusher, he's able to get a free run at the quarterback, and we can imagine that this might have hurried the throw just enough to force an incompletion. Baylor didn't bring a ton of exotic pressures in this game, but Oklahoma was plagued with a lot of inaccurate balls and drops, and so it seems that the Bears put just enough pressure on them to force them into mistakes. When the Sooners couldn't capitalize on their big play opportunities, they struggled to move the ball down the field, and the Baylor offense was slowly able to pull away for the win. Alright, that's it for this video. Keep checking back for breakdowns of offensive and defensive coordinators from all over the country, and I'll see you here next time.